Hi everyone, so this is my senior project. I decided to do a musical analysis of One Summer's Day from the anime film Spirited Away. I've loved this film for a really long time, and I think the music is something that's really interesting and you don't hear a lot of the time. So we'll get into it. So do a little bit of background here. Joe Hisashi was born as Mamoru Fujisawa, and he started playing the violin at about the age of 5. As he got older, he ended up enrolling at the Kunitachi College of Music, and then after he graduated, he started working as a typesetter for minimalist music until 1947, where he had started to work on a film called Gyatoruzu. He wrote for 2 other films around this time, Teknoporisu 21C and Sasuraige. Right after this, he released 2 albums, and then he met Miyazaki in 1983, where Miyazaki really enjoyed what he was doing with his music and wanted him to start composing for films. So far, he has composed music for 8 of the Miyazaki films, and he is considered one of the most acclaimed Japanese composers, a lot of the time being compared to John Williams in his fantasy-like approach to orchestration. So for the film, Spirited Away was released in 2001. It won the 2nd Oscar ever to be awarded for Best Animated Feature, and it was the first animated film to win an Academy Award. Miyazaki had actually come out of retirement to make this film, and he had based it on a friend's daughter as well as her father. And it was only released in America with subtitles to start with until Disney ended up picking it up and added in a dubbed version for it. 20 of the tracks for the film are written by Hisashi, except for the last one, which is actually written by the singer of that piece. And it is the first film in the US to earn $200 million in grosses before opening. It was super popular at the time. Okay, so about this piece specifically, it doesn't really have much of a tonal center, and a lot of this is because of the back and forth between chordal harmonies and tertian harmonies. That movement through chordal chords is a constant shift from major to minor, which also gives it a feeling of not having any sense of resolution within it. But it does flow through these different chord progressions very smoothly to where, while it might not be tertian, it doesn't sound like there's an absence of a tonal center. This song is heard 2 more times within the film. One of them is when Chihiro and Haku are eating after seeing her parents, and then the other one is towards the end of the film after she's completed Yubaba's test and is heading home with her parents. The overall structure of this piece is A, B, A prime, B prime, C. So the A section is measures 1 through 22, the B section is measures 22 through 40, A prime is 41 through 55, B prime is 56 through 66, and C is 67 until the end. Like I said before, the chordal harmonies is probably one of the biggest things with this piece, as well as pretty much all of his pieces, even just throughout the movie itself. Joe Hisashi uses a lot of chordal harmonies within his pieces. I think it, at least to me, it gives it more of a whimsical sound. And it's on the fine line of sounding tonal, but also sounding atonal. All right, so we're going to just kind of go chronologically through the piece, which is also at the very beginning of the film. It starts right when the film opens up until a certain point within the beginning. So I'm going to play the beginning portion, and then we'll discuss through it. Alrighty, so that is the first little section there. We're going to slip here. Okay, so I'm sorry, it's a little fuzzy. I had to pull it from what I was doing. So this is what we pretty much just heard up through measure 7. So this is introducing the main character Chihiro and her parents. They are driving to their new home that they've just moved into. Chihiro was not very excited about it. Her parents are trying to make her feel better, and it's this nice light song that's happening while they're driving in the car. So the chord progression that I have mainly seen within these first chords is an F major 7 that's rolled in the top hand, to an E minor 7 with extensions, a D minor 7 with extensions, and then an F sharp minor 7 with extensions. It's all giant chords, just very spread out. And because it's up in the treble voice for the entire portion of it, that we don't even get into the bass until measure 5, it gives it a very light summer tone as well as rolling the chords. It's just very light and airy. The first 3 chords include both the 3rd and the 5th above the bass, which does give it a little bit more of a tertian feel. However, the 4th chord is completely chordal. I mean, you can see it's just stacked fourths all the way up. And I think with it being an F sharp minor 7, it just sounds very interesting all of a sudden after going from somewhat more tertian into something completely chordal. So then measures 6 and 7 is what I'd consider the motif of this piece. You hear that motif quite often repeated in varying octaves, in varying speeds. I mean, that motif is heard pretty much throughout this entire piece as well as throughout the entire film. It's just very easy, very light, and I like that on the lower portion of it, it's very simple. It's just held whole notes throughout that. In measure 22, which is more of the center of the piece, which we can see here, 22, 23, that there is more of a tonal center within this section. And you can see we're moving at measure 24 from an F9 to an E major 7 to A minor, D7, and then G7 sus as well, then back to D7. So there is more of a tonal center now, but it is still heavily influenced by the chordal harmonies. And we're going to listen to that. All right, here is that section. All right, so you can hear it definitely sounds a lot more tonally centered than before, which is a really nice change of pace. I think this back and forth between tertian and chordal harmony is really nice and kind of keeps you on your toes. You don't really know when to expect one or the other. All right, so now we're at the middle of the piece. So this is when Chihiro's dad kind of thinks he's taken a wrong turn here. And he's thinking about going back, but they do see the house up on the hill, so he thinks that going through the forest will just get them. It's just a little weird of a place. It's harmonized mostly in A minor in this section. There's a few chordal and jazz-like chords throughout this section as well. And the progression that it moves through is more into an evaded cadence. It does not end how you would expect it to. Before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and listen to that. It just continues on from where we left off. Alrighty, so that's that section. The where I just played you is a little bit not as farther ahead as 57. It's a little bit before, but it's the same material, which is, yeah, so that material is just found again right here. It does return to eighth notes at measure 60, so the beginning of this section, 56 to 60, is varied a little bit, but 60 until that next section is exactly the same. And then this is starting to move into the acceleration of the car into the forest, which it transitions really beautifully into that. So I'm going to play what this next section is going to sound like. Alright, so as we can see in here, that was measure 69 into 75. You can see that right there. So this is more of a call and response layout. There's a syncopated rhythm that's happening starting at measure 67. The bass notes are super simple. It's just on the 1 and 3 of every measure. And they're not really varying all that much. They're just laying a nice foundation. It is a version of the A and B sections, which is what we talked about in the beginning of the piece. Throughout, you can hear that motif, especially at measure 70. It's a very similar version, and it continues that motif over and over in varying voices, and as well as now we're adding triplets in to make it a little bit faster. So this is kind of where the sequencing really starts to happen. So I'm going to play what we're looking at with 76 down there. Alrighty, so you can hear that back and forth between the two. So starting at measure 78, the right hand is off beat, and it's a 4/3 polyrhythm structure. And you can see that that sequence starts right there, but then that's the model sequence, but then the copy sequence actually starts on the 4th beat of measure 78. So the sequence doesn't even fully finish that entire measure. It just kind of comes in right beforehand. And it goes all the way in, and then that model sequence starts again on on beat 3 of measure 79, and we see it happen again where now it's on beat 2 of measure 80 for the copy, and it keeps going back and forth between that. The difference between the model sequence and the copy sequence is a 1/6, and then when it's repeated again from 79 to 80, it's now a 2nd in difference between the two, between the first model and the second model. In measure 81 though, that you can see that the sequence does change and it goes fully down, and there is not a copy sequence that starts up again after that. It just goes all the way down. So we're calling that more of a partial sequence. And this does a really good job of transitioning into the closing passage of the piece. So now we're at the end of the piece. And so I'm going to play this little section here for you so you can hear where we're at. It's very intense. So at this point in the music, Chihira's dad has almost hit a statue because he's just driving through the forest super, super fast, and they're not paying attention, and he almost hits a statue, so he slams on his brakes, and they all look up out of the windows and see this building that you can see in the picture here. It's very odd that this building is in the middle of a forest, and it's very tall, and it looks kind of run down. So what we just heard is this section right here. And so I've identified at measure 88 a D flat 13 chord that we hear there, which is then just rolled in 89 back and forth constantly. And then in measure 90, we hear a C minor 13 over E flat, an A diminished 13 over E flat, an F minor 11 over E flat, and a C minor 11 over E flat. So that E flat is continuous through the bass from measure 90 to the end. And the upper chords are composed of 4 notes that are a segment of a chain of fifths. So similar to a chordal harmony, just stacked a little bit differently. And the chords are also moving up stepwise. You can see in measure 90 with the F on the top note, and then it goes G, A flat, B flat. So it is moving up stepwise, which is really interesting. And it also is now putting a wide range between your bass and your treble clef, which I think gives it almost this more grand sense, especially because now your harmonies are so much farther apart that all you're just waiting for that ending. And it ends almost like leaves you on a cliffhanger, like you're waiting for that next chord, and then it just stops, it fades out completely. And I think that also though signifies that there's something new is starting to happen with it, and that this is now the end of the beginning. Basically, we're beginning a new story. We're inviting Chihiro and her parents into this building. Okay, so as we've been listening to, I've been playing the orchestral arrangement, which is the one that is used within the film. For this analysis, I did choose to use a piano arrangement, just for the sake of being able to see those chords a lot easier than trying to analyze an entire orchestral piece. Also because I don't have much background in analyzing orchestral pieces. The piano arrangement does include two sections within it. We're going to call those sections E and F, which is what they're labeled within it, that are not found in this orchestral arrangement, but that I did find in a different piece within the film called Day of the River. I believe that this, in a sense, was probably how Hisashi had originally written the piece, and then decided that those two sections could be used elsewhere, within other pieces. But I do like them within the piano piece. I think it adds a little bit more, especially because for a solo instrument, you can only do so much within that solo instrument, that sometimes adding a little extra can just add more to it. Also, the use of the letter markings, like I mentioned with E and F, was super helpful in identifying the sections within the piece and really mapping out the analysis of the piece overall. The piano also does a really good job of expanding the harmonies across it. And the piano is also really prevalent within the orchestral piece itself, that I felt the piano was the other best instrument to analyze outside of any other orchestral instrument. All right, so in conclusion, funny enough, this is also towards the end of the film, so we're at the conclusion. So Hisashi really believes that music is not something to fill the silence in a film, but is an element on its own, which drives the story and can manipulate an audience's response. And I 100% agree with that. I think that even in this, short 3.5 minutes song, you already feel like so much is going on because the music is driving you towards that. And that's something that I don't normally see with a lot of other movies, where I feel like the music is really a part of it. Whereas in these films, especially, and mostly in this film, you really feel like the music tells the story. You can listen to the music outside of the film and feel like a story is being told. And I commend him on his ability to do that with hit pieces. The entire piece is filled with so much emotion from the beginning to the end. Especially in the beginning, you can hear Chihiro's sadness within that piano intro, and then you can hear the acceleration of the car. You can hear the grandness of the building that they come across. You can hear all of these different layers just while listening to the music, even if you have really never seen the film before. It's really interesting to be able to analyze and look through. I don't believe that there's really any single meaning of this piece. I think the title itself says a lot. One Summer's Day. I think that's, it's a summer's day. It's inviting you to have any sort of day that you could imagine, and this is just what happens on Chihiro's day. And I think it really reflects also the innocence of Chihiro and a lot of human emotion. Hisashi has said that the piano is what he considers the innocence and human emotion, and in most live performances, Hisashi himself will go and play the piano. For almost any live performance of any of his pieces, he will choose to play the piano for it. And I think that speaks quite volumes of his orchestral technique, where he wants people to know that that is his human emotion coming through, and it's really great to see. I also think that the harmonies in this piece also seem really atonal, but overall, you kind of don't think about it in a sense, because the flow and the structure of this piece is so well done that you you miss those sections where it would be atonal. It sounds like it might actually just be tonal, and that there's just, an extra two notes or something. It's really interesting to watch that. But however, the faster sections, like when the car is accelerating, we do notice that there's more of a tertian sound. I think it's a mixture between it being a faster section in general, especially with those triplets, as well as the bass holding those steady quarter notes consistently. I think instead of the bass having also chordal harmonies, it's very strictly tertian in that moment. And while the upper hand might not necessarily be tertian, the bass gives you enough of a tertian sound. All right, well, thank you for watching my little presentation. If you have not seen this film, highly recommend you watch this film. It is one of my favorites. I recommend all Studio Ghibli films. The music is phenomenal. The animation is beautiful. It's great. It's a great movie to watch on a day off, especially now that we're all in quarantine. But yeah, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.